Hey all, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our hands-on review of the Xiaomi Qin 1S Plus. This is a feature phone, but it's a smart feature phone. You can think of it as a competitor to a lot of KaiOS devices, like the Alcatel My Flip that we did a review on. So despite having a very traditional kind of nostalgic design, it does have a few more smart features, like the addition of built-in Wi-Fi. And the reason why it's branded as AI on the front of the box is because it does come with Xiaomi's AI assistant. But unfortunately, this part only works in Chinese, just like how Amazon's Alexa only recognizes English. Technically, it's running on a scaled-down version of Android. It's just been customized heavily by Xiaomi. There's also a translator built in that recognizes over 16 languages, and otherwise is also going to be quite affordable, on sale for as low as $50 at times. There's a USB Type-C cable that you can use to charge and sync. Great to see a modern connector as opposed to micro USB even on such a low-end device. SIM card ejector tool because the battery here is not user removable, and there's a quick user manual. Taking a closer look at the design, it is very simple and not anything too extraordinary, just a candy bar form factor, but it's nostalgic and does have a slightly larger screen than we saw from feature phones in the early 2000s at least. Has again 2.8 inches diagonally. There's just a earpiece on the front. There is no front-facing camera. The bottom here features a D-pad as well as an OK key. They're all pretty tactile and responsive. Shoulder keys and talk and end keys that also serves as a power key, and then a standard T9 layout for the numbers, which can also be used for text entry. There is some predictive text capabilities, and there's also shortcuts for accessing the MP3 player and a voice recorder / assistant. As you can see here, it's insanely quick to boot up. It takes less than 5 seconds to go from cold boot. Otherwise, the frame of the handset is still being made out of polycarbonate plastic, but it does feel surprisingly hefty and very solid, similar to other Xiaomi's Redmi phones in terms of construction. It's a unibody. The top here features an IR blaster, so you can use this as a remote to control your TV, AC conditioner units, things like that. Dual SIM card tray is on the side here. The base here features a USB Type-C port, and there is indeed stereo speakers. That was the claim from Xiaomi, so we'll have to test that out. Now, there is no standard 3.5mm headphone jack, however, which is a little bit disappointing on such a kind of retro phone. I would have liked to see it. You can use a Type-C to 3.5 adapter, or you can use Bluetooth to connect to wireless buds. Now, the right-hand side is completely bare, so we don't get standard volume rockers on it, which is also one other con. It does look very clean, but having those controls would have been quite handy. You can still rely on the D-pad here to change the volume up and down, but that's just one thing to keep in mind. And that's pretty much it. It just says Qin, and there's an AI phone, and that's it. Now, this does not have a camera on the rear either, as you can see. Taking a closer look at the UI here, we can see if we're connected to the internet right now using Wi-Fi. If we have the airplane mode on, with the battery percentage remaining, as well as the date and time, we can see over here. We can actually drag down to access essentially the notification tray, like on Android, pretty standard stuff. We can turn Wi-Fi on or off, Bluetooth. We can also activate a flashlight that's using the screen that turns it white, because again, there is no LED torch on the rear since there is no camera. But anyways, pretty standard and simple small widgets that you can control. And then under Notify, you can also see if there's any other notifications, missed text messages or calls, things like that you can take a look at. So that's the tray. And then down below here, we have two hotkeys. If you press the left one, what it does is it opens up the smart AI assistant. 北京天气怎么样？
北京今天大雪转小雪，记得带伞，注意防滑。零下5度到1度，降温6度，空气质量良，有大雾黄色，寒潮蓝色预警，请注意防范。
Okay, so basically it's saying that what's the temperature like in Beijing, and the temperature in Beijing right now is actually snowing, and it's about -5 degrees. And on the right, we have access to our phone book to take a look at our contact information. The middle here just takes us into the main menu. So here we have the settings. It's pretty basic, but you can turn on or off Wi-Fi, change Bluetooth profiles, things like that. So very simple and straightforward. Now, if I take a look at display settings, what you're able to do is change, say, the wallpaper, and there are a few that you can pick from. They are reasonably attractive. The feature on the right here is called the Dual Chat, and this is essentially integration with WeChat. So if you have a WeChat account, that's the equivalent of a Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, you're able to sign into your account, and this basically acts as a tethered walkie-talkie of sorts. You're able to send voice memos and also type out different characters and words, and whenever you send it, you'll be able to see that message on your actual smartphone where you have the app installed. Other features are pretty basic. You have the remote control function here. We also have a basic music player, which allows you to sort through by songs, artists, playlists, albums as well, and your own recordings. Although, again, there's no standard headphone jack. Now, you can also take a look at weather information, which is pretty simple and straightforward. That kind of refreshes itself, and you're able to see different cities. You can also see it for the next few days, and you can add more cities as well. Down below here, we have access to their Translator, which is also part of that Dual suite of applications. It supports, again, around 16 languages by default. We can also speak to translate or type. Again, using cloud engines such as Microsoft's Bing translate engines and Google Translate and whatnot. So you do need to have access to the internet. If you're severed from the internet connection, then it's not going to have an offline mode, but otherwise it works all right. We also have access to the web browser, which is probably the most interesting and useful feature out of the bunch here. You can see that, again, it is just using a standard Android-based WebKit browser, and loading speeds are actually reasonably fast as well. Seeing the predictive text at play, you can see I'm typing out Amazon, and it's popped up a suggestion down below here, so it does indeed work fairly well in terms of trying to guess what you're trying to type, which at least makes the process a little less clunky. Wi-Fi reception as well as cellular connectivity are both quite strong for a pretty entry-level phone. I was constantly in an area where I could get at least 3 bars of reception, which is good, and you can see here that the page is loading along just fine, even though this is a fairly complex site. There are some basic settings on here, such as the ability to switch between different tabs, go to a home page, take a look at your history, but that's pretty much it. So there is no option for you to, say, change into the desktop version of sites. Now, one thing I will say, though, is there is no way to keep apps running in the background. So once we exit out of it, if we go back into the browser, what you'll find is it just launches back onto this home page. So there's no way to switch between open applications, just like KaiOS. Right, so pausing things there, the takeaway is the audio quality is actually really good. It's very clean and gets much louder than expected. Even at higher volumes, it doesn't distort, and that's because it does indeed have stereo speakers. It uses the earpiece as a secondary speaker, and the primary speaker is on the base of the phone. So it's the same trick that we see on some flagship devices, true smartphones, which is really interesting to see Xiaomi incorporate it on such a budget device. But it works well, and there's a nice amount of stereo separation. So above average speakers for sure, and you're able to listen to some music without even using headphones if you want to just share them with friends and family. So web browsing is definitely possible. It might not be as smooth as on our smartphones, but it's something that is surprisingly usable for looking up quick news feeds, as well as maybe even doing some quick video watching and searching things up. There's also an internet radio player app, but most of the internet channels are based in China. So it's mostly Chinese news as well as music and culture. But you can try searching, and there are some other Western-facing stations, as well as some more pop-affiliated channels for music that you can definitely find. It's all using, again, internet, so Wi-Fi or 4G if you pop in a SIM card. And playback itself is pretty fluid, but it's quite similar to what you'll find from other Xiaomi smart speakers that we've seen before. You are able to access those internet radio radio stations. Now under tools, you're able to see things like a reader tool, read along very quick text that you may want to drag over from a computer. You can even change the font. I wouldn't say this is a great experience for, reading back books, but the app here is surprisingly fully featured in terms of changing the brightness. You can even access a night mode, so that kind of inverts the screen. You can change the color of the background pages to be warmer or cooler. So it's a fun little app for doing some light reading, more like text or notes, I would say. There's also a very basic calendar on here, so not anything too specific, but you can actually select a date and even do things like add very quick appointments. So you can schedule something like a reminder and it can alert you, so there are notification supports. You can also access a gallery app from here, but it's kind of tucked away because, again, there is no camera, so you have to drag and drop files yourself from a computer. It's basically just a photo album. File Explorer, again, that you can look up any text files and photos in a directory, and that is pretty much it. So quite simple. Now there's also a clock here, which allows you to add different alarms to remind you at different points in the day. And then games is kind of interesting. It has a very scarce selection, but they are similar to KaiOS kind of Nokia phones. You have access to the classic Snake and Tetris. Very simple animations, but it does work pretty well using the D-pad. You can navigate along and try to hit these squares that moves, and you gain scores if you don't kind of run into a wall or into one of your own tails. But overall, pretty decent. Your high score is displayed on the top, and it's a fun, very nostalgic retro game that is built on in. Not too demanding, not too taxing on the processor, but again, works well enough. All right, so let's go back here. And the other game here is just Tetris. So another very classic title, not too many surprises, but it is functional, and you can definitely kind of get a little bit of fun out of it if you're bored and out and about. Going out of this, that is pretty much it, the last row of applications, as you can see. So perhaps the biggest limitation of this compared to newer KaiOS phones is a lack of an app store. We didn't see an app store, granted, on the Alcatel MyFlip, which was running on KaiOS version 1.0, but as KaiOS is getting more developers on board, they have pushed out a app store that allows you to get slightly more content on it, things like mini games, more utility tools, but that's currently missing on here. Finally, I want to say that the battery life on this phone is actually very good, even with Wi-Fi or 4G turned on. This is a device that will definitely last you longer than a standard smartphone. In my testing, I got well over 3 to 4 days before I needed to recharge it again with sporadic use in between. If it's on standby mode, it will last you well over a week before you need to recharge it, so a little reminiscent of the classic Nokias in that sense. That's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Xiaomi Qin AI 1S Plus. For the money, again, around $50 when it's on sale. I would say that it's a decent choice if you are looking for a budget or maybe a backup phone to take with you. You don't need something more fancy. To give this to a child, use as a secondary phone, a companion device. It does have many purposes, and overall it performs pretty well. It has a unique set of features, that's for sure. Things like an IR blaster and stereo speakers, in addition to having a translator app that actually is really useful. With that being said, I think that for folks that do need something a little bit more, there are other low-cost Android phones. Xiaomi even offers the Redmi Go, which is an Android Go powered smartphone that sells for about the same cost. So in terms of absolute value, this might be a little bit harder to recommend. But if you are someone that likes having a physical keyboard, you want something simple and straightforward so that's going to last you for a long time in terms of battery, then perhaps this is going to be a nice alternative to consider. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Xiaomi Qin AI 1S Plus.